Since yesterday, the GST 2.0 set of reforms have come into force. And during this, the Prime Minister of India addressed the countrymen, and during this particular address, the Prime Minister emphasized on the need to promote consumption in the domestic market of the goods which are manufactured in India, irrespective of who has invested in producing these goods. And this eventually will help India to become a developed country by 2047. Now, in order to become a developed country by 2047, India faces multiple issues. Let me focus on one very important issue out of all of them, that is the international trade, exports as well as imports. Let me start with the first one, exports. Exports are of two different types, merchandise as well as services. Let me focus on merchandise now. Out of the total global exports of merchandise, India accounts for around 1.9%. Despite multiple reforms being implemented and the value of the merchandise exports increasing, India accounts for less than 2% of the total merchandise exports. Now, in this particular area, India faces a lot of issues now or concerns going forward. For example, the Trump tariffs. Let me give you one example to illustrate how Trump tariffs are destroying the exports from India or reducing the exports from India. In the last 2 days, I passed through two important textile centers in India. One is Tirupur and the second one is the city of Coimbatore. Both of them are from the state of Tamil Nadu. If you take the total textile exports in the last year, they valued more than 3 lakh crore rupees. And from these two cities alone, the textile exports amounted to more than 45,000 crore rupees. And take a wild guess, out of these 45,000 crore rupees, how much would have gone to only USA? Whatever your number is, it will be shorter, because from the city Tirupur alone, last year, more than 15,000 crore rupees worth of textiles were sent to USA. And now, with 50% tariffs being announced by Mr. Donald Trump, which are applicable to multiple merchandise exports, including these, the exports from this particular city this year have dropped. The exporters have stated that they are selling these textiles at a very high discounted price, and they are expecting a lower cash recovery of more than 2,000 crore rupees in this year alone. And not just this, there is a rising concern associated with the unemployment as well as a dropping wages. In fact, in this particular city Tirupur, there is a migration of labor which happens from different states such as Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Bihar, West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, etc. And this year, the hiring of migrant labor also has dropped in various states because of the Trump tariffs. So, here is one example. Now, let me shift to the service exports from India. No doubt, the overall service exports from India over a period of time have increased. Today, the total service exports from India out of the total global trade amounts to more than 4%. But in recent times, there have been multiple reforms or the initiatives or the steps which have been announced in the global market by countries such as USA, which are going to harm these service exports. In addition to this, the service industry in India is already facing the issue of artificial intelligence, and the global volatility is an added pressure. In the USA alone, in the last 2 weeks, two important initiatives or the steps which have been announced are going to dent the service exports from India. The first one is the Hire Act, which has been introduced in the Congress of USA, which will basically, after the imposition, will have a 25% tax on any company in USA which will outsource services to other countries including India. Followed by this, very recently Mr. Donald Trump also has announced a very high steep or a very high, let's say, the charges or the fees which are applicable to the companies which will apply for H1B visas of their employees. These two reforms alone are going to have a huge impact on the service exports from India. If this is the situation of the exports, let's shift to imports now. India is a net importer. That should not be surprising to you. That is a very common knowledge for all of you. India is a net importer. And within this particular imports, if you look at the United Nations data, what it does is, it will divide the imports into different forms or different groups. One is the intermediary group, second one is the raw material, third one is the consumer goods, and the fourth one is the capital goods. India faces a deficit in all of these except consumer goods. Whereas if you look at China, China has a surplus in all these particular four areas except the import of raw material. And what is the inference of this particular information that I gave you just now? The inference is that the value addition done in China is much higher compared to whatever is the value addition done by Indian companies. Take a data set for that matter. The total imports into China last year were around $2.4 trillion and the total exports were more than $3.4 trillion, which means China has a surplus in this particular area. If you look at India for that matter, India has a huge amount of a trade deficit. This is also an indicator that we need to focus on promotion of manufacturing. Now coming to the third very important aspect of the discussion, is consumption in the domestic market sufficient to promote recovery or promote growth in India to become a developed country? If you look at all the imports that are done in India, hardly 10% of the imports are basically consumer goods, which means just by replacing the imports of the consumer goods with the domestically manufactured goods, it will not be sufficient for India to become a developed country. Then what needs to be done? What are the important steps that the government of India needs to take in the coming days in order to ensure that all of these issues are addressed? One, India needs to promote more and more investment in domestic manufacturing. This is a very important step that the government of India needs to focus. Not to say that India has not done anything in the past, it has done, multiple reforms have been implemented, but we need more reforms to promote domestic manufacturing. Second, promote consumption. Nothing wrong with that. Promote consumption. Reason being, more than 60% of the total GDP comes through the consumption, private final consumption expenditure. More the consumption happens, the export reliance or the import reliance will be lesser. These goods, even if I am not able to export to the international market, there is a ready-made domestic market in India which will help production of more goods and services, consumption, and overall, right, basically higher GDP. In addition to this, we also need to focus on one very important aspect, that is essentially the concept of diversification. Right now, if you look at, let's say, the service exports, we are exporting to very limited number of countries. Textile exports, we are exporting to very limited countries. What we need to is basically diversify to multiple countries, enter multiple markets, which will help us essentially to control any kind of, let's say, impact because of the volatility that can be caused because of the let's say events in the global market, or for that matter, if one country imposes a restriction, we have access to multiple other countries. So these are some of the reforms which need to be taken by the government in the coming days in order to ensure that India will become not only a country which is a self-reliant but also a developed country by 2047. For more such interesting content, do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel now.